Have you ever considered that maybe you're just playing the wrong game? All of us want to win. I firmly believe that. We have aspirations for ourselves, for our businesses, for our families. We want financial success without sacrificing our health and our relationships. We dream of thriving across all dimensions of our life, not just thriving on one front while sacrificing the others. But what happens when, despite your best efforts, you find yourself trapped in a cycle where victory feels perpetually out of reach? When you've implemented every fucking tactic under the sun, read every book, hired every consultant, and still find yourself running faster just to stay in place. I see this pattern repeatedly in my coaching practice, and it's one I've experienced personally too. The mounting frustration as we try harder and harder without seeing the results we seek, the growing suspicion that perhaps we're fundamentally flawed or incapable, and the slow surrender to a reality that feels less than what we know is possible for ourselves. This can be one of life's most isolating experiences, the gap between where you are and where you want to be despite doing everything quote-unquote right. And without the proper framework to understand what's happening, this frustration can drag on for years and years until eventually we give up and just settle for mediocrity. Now, I believe in these situations, we're focusing on the wrong question entirely. And this realization has the power to change everything, something I want to share with you today. When you strip away all of the complexity of your strategy for winning, whether it's at work, relationships, health, or any domain for that matter, it really comes down to two fundamental choices. The first one, where will you play? This determines your environment, right? Where you live, what you do for work, who you marry, what friends you surround yourself with, what communities you join and participate in. The second one, how will you win? This shapes your approach within that chosen environment. These are your daily habits, your systems, your tactics to getting what you want. But you see, the mistake most of us make is focusing relentlessly on the second question while treating the first question, where will we play, as fixed and almost unchangeable. I often describe where you play as drawing bright lines in your life. These bright lines create the container within which you operate. They define the boundaries of your playing field. We try new productivity hacks to squeeze more from our 24 hours than questioning whether we're in the right job. We implement elaborate communication strategies with our spouses instead of confronting whether the relationship is fundamentally aligned with who we've become. And we hire help to manage our overwhelm without actually examining if we're committed to maybe too many activities at once. This happens because redrawing these bright lines feels risky, doesn't it? It feels disruptive and often scary. It's way easier to tinker with how we approach our current situation than to fundamentally change the game by drawing new boundaries for ourselves. Let me tell you about a brilliant mortgage broker that I've had the pleasure of working with for the last few years out in Atlantic Canada. Year after year, he has been one of the most decorated professionals in his industry. But after starting a family about 5 years ago, his definition of winning had shifted fundamentally. He wanted to be home by 5, spend quality time with his daughter. He wanted evenings free after his daughter went to bed around 7:30 or 8 so that he had some time to actually pursue his own interests, connect with his wife, and actually enjoy his life instead of answering emails. Now, he had a team of 7 people when we first started working together, so lots of capacity within his organization. So we spent our first few months together implementing various how-to-win tactics, things like hiring an executive assistant to manage his emails and calendar, building more structure into his team meetings and one-on-ones, and bringing on even additional producers to take pressure off of his personal performance. But despite these changes, he remained overwhelmed. While leading his team, he continued meeting with his clients every single week. Something he excelled at, but truthfully, it was keeping him perpetually reactive. It was the unplanned needs of new clients and personal referrals that kept him up late and at the office longer than expected, and living in a constant state of hypervigilance. With his second child on the way, he knew something had to change. But more how-to-win tactics weren't going to do the trick. So during one of our coaching calls, he launched into what had become a repetitive conversation about stress. So I decided to change the direction. I said, I think it's time we change where you're playing, not how you're trying to win. This simple statement created an opening for an entirely different conversation. And what had emerged was the realization that he was holding on to a belief that he personally needed to meet with clients for his business to succeed. This belief was not only compromising his personal aspirations, but it was creating a ceiling for his company's growth too. So that day, he made a decision. He would no longer meet with clients. Instead, he would focus solely on coaching his team and developing investment projects that aligned with his vision for the future. And let me tell you, within a month, the transformation was remarkable. After 2 weeks of transitioning his client meetings to his team, he found himself home every single night by 5. The overwhelmed, disappointed energy that had characterized our calls was replaced by lightness, possibility, and a renewed sense of pride. It was amazing to watch. And this continued. A mere 3 months later, as we got into the spring that season, his company was up 70% year over year without him meeting clients himself anymore. They were attracting top producers from other competing brokerages, and most importantly, he was finally winning on his own terms. He was present with his family. He was free from constant stress, all while his business was thriving. By changing where he played, everything shifted. After months of trying to optimize how he played, he realized he was working on the wrong level of his strategy. This principle that I'm sharing with you extends far beyond business leadership. I bet you're just like me. You've seen people struggle for years trying to make a relationship work through endless communication exercises and date nights, only to discover a profound sense of peace when they finally acknowledge that it's time to separate or to get a divorce. The relief that comes from changing where you play can be immediate and transformative. I've watched families exhaust themselves juggling competitive travel sports schedules, hiring babysitters, coordinating complex carpools, missing weekend after weekend of downtime, until somebody finally asks, hey, is this game actually worth playing at this level of intensity? The space that opens up when we choose a different path often reveals possibilities they couldn't have seen before. I've even experienced this myself, spending years trying to moderate my relationship with certain social circles that left me feeling drained. I tried showing up less frequently, setting time boundaries on myself, even preparing conversation topics in advance, or predetermining how many drinks I might allow myself to have, but none of it worked until I finally recognized I could simply just choose to play in different social environments altogether. But these aren't easy choices. They're not easy decisions. They involve grief, uncertainty, and fear. They require facing the sunk cost of time and energy that we've already invested. But they also create the possibility for alignment that no amount of tactical optimization can achieve. So how do you know when it's time to question where you're playing rather than how you're playing? Well, I like to look for these indicators with my clients. The first one is that your efforts to change aren't moving you closer to your definition of winning. Despite implementing new strategies or systems, you just still feel stuck in the same patterns. The second one is that your resentment continues to grow. Resentment is such an interesting barometer. This is where you find yourself increasingly frustrated, not just with circumstantial challenges, but with fundamental aspects of your situation. Or when your self-talk has become constantly negative, the voice in your head regularly expresses discontent, doubt, or resignation about your circumstances. But the most obvious one, if you ask me, is that you've tried multiple approaches with minimal improvement. You've attempted 2 or 3 new ways of doing things, and you're still experiencing the same problems. When tactical solutions repeatedly fail to create meaningful change, it's time to consider that you might just be playing the wrong game entirely. So I think about courage a little bit differently these days. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't persevering at all odds. It's being willing to walk away and to start fresh. If you're feeling stuck, try this simple exercise with me, okay? So take out a piece of paper and write down where you're currently playing. Your job, your relationship status, where you live, how you spend your time. And now rather than immediately jumping to how you might improve your approach, ask yourself, what are 2 completely different environments where I might play instead? What would it look like if I made a significant change? And of course, don't worry, this is just an exploration, but it's important that we give ourselves the space to be able to dream. You don't have to act on anything quite yet. Just allow yourself the freedom to imagine different alternatives. So next, once you have this kind of sketched out in front for yourself, sit with your fears for a little bit. Ask yourself what makes you hesitant about these alternatives. And get really honest. Sometimes our fears point to important considerations, but often they're simply just protecting us from necessary growth. Then, once you're done that, imagine making such a change went extraordinarily well. What would become possible that isn't available to you now? How would your daily experience be different? How would you feel waking up in the morning? Once you do this, it's important that you ask yourself one really important question that often breaks things open. How will you feel 2 years from now if nothing changes about where you're playing? This question for me and the folks that I work with reveals the true cost of staying put. When my mortgage broker client imagined himself in the same role, struggling with the same shit for the next 3 years, the physical response in his body was immediate. His face flushed, he held his breath. The prospect became unbearable, creating the internal tension necessary to overcome his resistance to change. I've sat with clients as they've imagined their future selves, watching the subtle shift in their expression when they recognize a truth that they've been avoiding. It's that moment, that small internal acknowledgement, that often contains more power than months of tactical adjustments in your life. So, here's the thing about changing where you play. I need to tell you this. It's not a forever solution. At some point, you, me, and my mortgage broker client will hit a new ceiling. We're going to face new challenges, and we're going to need to reconsider the strategy again. But that's just the nature of growth. The game isn't finding a permanent solution. It's about recognizing when you're trying to solve the wrong problem. Sometimes the most profound transformation comes not from doing things differently, but from doing different things entirely. The question isn't whether you concede where you are. With enough force of will, perhaps you could. The real question is whether winning where you're currently playing will create the life you truly want. Sometimes the bravest strategic choice isn't figuring out how to win at the game you're playing. It's having the courage to play a different game altogether.